Great. And then with regard to the second to the last paragraph in the minutes, a line that in about the fourth line down that begins, Mr. Coons did note that the single driveway was not something that could change. And after that, we're going to change the language. It says, and on matters concerning school operations and protocols, would be strictly in the purview of the principal, the district, and the Board of Education. And I think that'll complete that sentence and be more accurate than was originally drafted. Are there any other corrections that anybody has to the minutes? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve?
Yeah, I'll make that motion. It's Diane.
I'll second it. Duke.
Duke seconds. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Are you opposing, Diane?
No, I'm saying I approve. I'm a little late.
Any abstentions? Any negatives? The motion passes. All right. Our next item of business is for Randy and Amy to talk about our P&Z meeting that you had and the withdrawal from the ZBA. Randy?
Hey there. Yeah, so starting with the ZBA, it was basically determined by the Planning and Zoning Department that the variance request was not required given the change in the phasing plan. And it was really mostly due to the reduction in time frame that the additional breach of site coverage would be taking place. So that was a very positive event, worked in our favor, eliminated the need for the presentation, which we assumed would have gone by smoothly anyway on Wednesday. And then in regards to the Tuesday P&Z meeting, that also, I think, went pretty smoothly. I think originally the content was supposed to be mostly focused on stormwater retention and site drainage. That's been moved now to next week's meeting on the 26th, I believe. 26th. But items covered were, let's see, there was a bit of landscaping in there. There was some discussion about property lines and abutting neighbors, and I'm sure Amy can add context to a couple other topics, but generally it was pretty quick. We were done by 9:15, and it seems like traffic and from that the traffic perspective seems to be complete. It's from a discussion point of view, and that's about it. So we'll see if we can wrap it up in terms of our presentation on the 26th, and then it'll move to deliberation. Amy, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Just another piece of that planning and zoning meeting was to respond to one of the neighbors, the family that lives just south of Mike Alfieri's home. They had written a letter to the P&Z expressing their concern about being so close to the ELP playground, which honestly, I'm not sure if it's any closer than the existing playground in that location or similar location. But we were able to satisfy, I think, their concerns with explanation of the additional plantings that Jessica is planning for and the privacy fence, etc. So I think that I hope that satisfied his concerns. He also had a concern about being able to see the rooftop units from his second floor. I'm not sure if we can help that, but we do have the roof screens around the units. So, from ground level and from first floor of their house, that should be okay.
Okay, well, three meetings with P&Z is not unusual, and frankly, if we can get through all of this by next week, that would be great. The fact that the ZBA is no longer, we no longer have to apply to them for a variance is good. So as far as the regulatory stuff, we seem to be pretty well on track, and that's great. Thank you. I certainly hope that the stormwater retention issues are ironed out between Benesh and Redness and Mead. I know there was a lot of back and forth, and hopefully that will be solved, and both parties can agree as to what the proper solution will be. Okay, so our next item of business is really talking, and the primary purpose for this meeting is to talk about value management items that we've talked about, looked at, discovered, whatever. And there are three. The reason for this, of course, is that we're going back to the original design development estimate, which came in at over 10% of over our budget. And we've been working on trying to figure out what to do to bring those costs down. So far, and Amy and Kemp and David will talk about this, we really have three large buckets that we've dealt with. One, there are certain estimates that have been adjusted with a closer pencil or with looking more closely at the drawings. So there have been some savings just by virtue of estimate adjustments, and they're not insubstantial. Secondly, as part of that first bucket, there are items that were in the design development drawings, but we had, by the time we were getting closer to getting the estimates, we'd already agreed that we were going to make changes. Example, there was originally a natural gas fired generator, and it required an expensive gas line to feed it. Both of those have changed up to a diesel powered generator, eliminating the gas line for relatively substantial savings. So those two items, the adjustment estimates and things that we already had made changes to, are one group. The next group are the big things that our small working group talked about for the last couple of days, and we'll go over that, at least the big items. And there's a third group of items that have been proposed by SLAM and ONG, which are not yet priced out. And so we really can't tell you what savings we might find in there, even if we were to adopt them. So the point is we have to wait for the estimates, and then we would then consider them and come back. So with that as a preface, I'm going to turn it over to Amy and Kemp and David to go forward.
All right, thank you, Kip. This is Kemp. Appreciate the setup. And I also wanted to thank the committee for their patience in this process. It's never easy when we're creating a building, a one-off building from scratch, as more information is coming in, as we go through the development of the design and costs are being ascertained for those developments, especially on a site like this where it's an occupied construction site. But I am confident, and I think you'll see today that we will be able to get this project into our budget range. And so with that, if you could advance a slide, Amy. Our basic agenda today are just to go over our cost reduction goals. We've got site strategies to talk about, small reductions in building area, which are more nip and tuck type adjustments. No program is being cut. It's just a matter of just rearranging a few things with the building design to reduce building area. We have some reduction of extent of exterior walls to discuss, and then some major component systems that are still very energy efficient, primarily the HVAC system, and we'll go through that in a little bit more detail, and a few other large item savings, as Kip had mentioned. So the way it's structured, I'm going to go through some sub lists of the value management list that the team has been maintaining, and you can keep it on that slide. We have developed a list that is over 100 items long, some small, some large, and these sub lists that I'm going to present here represent what Kip first mentioned, estimate adjustments. This tends to happen as we go through the process. When we go through a reconciliation, we're essentially reconciling the numbers between two estimators. But once that reconciliation is completed, there invariably are some things that we dive a little deeper on, and the team is basically doing their job by vetting the numbers, making sure that the scope is correct, and that's what these numbers represent, these savings. So we've gone through the estimate in more detail as a team over the past couple of weeks, and we've identified this handful of items where some adjustments were required. And you'll note that on a couple of the line items, we verified that that scope clarification was actually included in the reconciled estimate. But just going through, there was some adjustments. TPO is the roofing, some cost, unit cost adjustments for that, which came equivalent to about $145,000. Some adjustments in the steel tonnage, clarifications from our structural engineer between the tonnage that was carried in the estimate relative to the tonnage that's in the current building model, as well as a unit price adjustment as well. That was a pretty substantial value of $472,000. Serpentine ceiling, there was a unit price carried in the estimate that was more than was necessary, and it was a fairly large area of ceiling that had that unit price, and so that was a unit price adjustment worth about $115,000. Similarly, LVT is a type of flooring. It's in the project, and we had a unit price adjustment for that as well. Similarly, ceramic tile for $30,000, and then for the light fixture package, there was an adjustment made for the economy of scale, the purchase power of the economy of scale for the project. So we were able to recognize that cost savings due to the quantity that will be purchased. That was about $178,000. Ductwork was included in the reconciliation. We kind of made that adjustment as we went through the reconciliation. Overflow piping, there was a misunderstanding of how the roof drainage overflow piping was actually being routed. In the design, it's being outlet up high, just underneath the roof level. And these are secondary overflow drains that are only used when you have the main primary drain is somehow blocked. So this is a code requirement. We don't need to pipe those drains all the way down to grade level. So we are outletting those up high. So that adjustment was about $157,000. And then there was just a minor clarification on the type of ductwork in the gymnasium, which was about $8,000. But when you sum all those up, they're about $1.3 million. And then when we back out the additional contingencies, escalation, fees, bonding, and insurance that's carried below the line, as we call it on the estimate, they sum up to about $1.4 million, which is a substantial number. And so we're happy to see that those adjustments could be made. Are there any questions on any of these before we go on to the next one? All right, so we can move on.
Kemp, I just wanted to clarify that the 12% is sort of a bucket of all those items that are listed down below there. Contingencies, escalation fees, bonding, insurance, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct. That's comprised of, we have in the estimate, we have a design and estimating contingency of approximately 2.5% to 3% right now. There's an escalation contingency to forecast increased costs from now to bid day, and that's about 2%. And then there is a construction manager's contingency of 3%. Bonding and insurance are both less than 1%, but together they're about 1.5%. And then there's the CM fee, which is, I think it's in the estimate for about 2% right now. So all those together aggregate up to the 12%.
Thank you for explaining that.
Sure. The next category were, as Kip mentioned, design team accepted value management items. These were items that were largely adjustments to design that were made between the time that we published the DD package for estimating and today. So just to go through some of those, eliminating the south egress door from the exploration zone in the media center. If you recall, the original design had a second means of egress door that was up high relative to the grade on the south side of the assembly wing. And so we needed to have a site retaining wall and a sidewalk to go up to that door to permit that to be an accessible ADA egress point. In working with our architect, our project architect, and taking another look at the code requirements, that room is actually not so big that it needs two means of egress. So we were able to eliminate that second point of egress there, and that was worth about $43,000. It's still being evaluated, and that's why the cell is yellow. I think that number may go up slightly from there as far as savings, additional savings. Kip, you mentioned the 200 watt diesel generator. We originally had a 300 kilowatt natural gas generator in the DD documents. It was determined after coordinating with the design team and the need to run the gas supply line around the entire assembly wing at a pretty substantial expense, which is the next line down of $77,000. We were able to cut out the need for that gas line to go around the building, as well as reduce the kilowatt size of the generator and make it a diesel generator, and recognize about $130,000 in savings there combined. With the revised phasing approach, this number is still being evaluated, but we have a revised mechanical space layout in the basement level of the lower level of the building, but in that basement area for the mechanical room, the fire pump room, and the electric and water service room. And in the original design, because the mechanical room and the fire pump room were partially under the assembly wing where we had the ramp going down, the head height was being affected in those spaces because of that ramping down of the upper level, which required us to push the floor level of those mechanical room and the fire pump room down further, 4 feet further down, which for any floor drains in those spaces which are required, that puts the sanitary invert that much lower in the ground, which required very deep excavations to put those sanitary lines in. With this rearrangement, with the new phasing, that allows us to raise those inverts by that 4 feet. We no longer need those depressions because those rooms are now underneath the administration area, and we don't have to push them down. So that was an advantage. And then also by moving those sanitary laterals further to the east, they no longer immediately adjacent to the existing building. So as part of the phased construction component of this project, those lines can be put in much more easily with less excavation supports, and therefore less cost. So that number is still yet to be populated in here. So that bottom line will go up, but those are some things that are going to factor into here. A reduction of roof drains, overflow drains by 9. There was just a correction on the count on the number of roof drains, so that was about 15,000. Surge protection, we had a few extra surge protection devices specified that are not really required or needed, and so that was worth about 23,000. And then we had a finish specified on our overflow drains that is just not necessary. We had polished brass. It must have been a carryover from somewhere else, and so we are reducing that to a bronze finish, a cast bronze finish, which is actually more in line with the architecture of this building, and that was worth $50,000. So, just some minor adjustments to the design that we just made the decision on our own. That all comes up to about 300,000. Any questions on these?
Kemp, do you have any feel for what the item listed as SU6, the sanitary lot, might provide in terms of additional savings? That sounds like a big.
Yeah, we really don't have that right now. That's something that ONGAP is still working on. So, but we will, I think it's probably going to be at least $20,000.
All right, well, thank you, that's good enough.
Okay.
Hi, this is Diane. One quick note on MEP 7 with regard to the surge protection devices, just if we could make sure that the town's involved in determining that we're adequately, that we're providing, and perhaps it's already the case, that we're providing adequate protection there.
Yeah, we'll double check that, Diane. We did ask the same question of our MEP engineer, and there still are surge protection devices in the design where the code requires them to be. There were just a few others that were not code requirements, and we were able to trim them out. But we will have the conversation with Mike to make sure that that everything is covered the way the owner would like it to be.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions on these items before we move on? All right, can we advance the slide, Amy? So there are 2 slides for the next list. As Kip mentioned, large value management items, and we put recommended on here because I think we kind of, as a team, had a mutual agreement that nothing would make it to the list if it wasn't something that could be accepted. And then, so the recommendation here is these are some large items that can really rein in the cost of the project, and at a pretty substantial number that you'll see on the next page. But there are a few things that are still pending some information. For example, and I don't want to spend too much time going through all these. I'm going to hit some of the higher value ones, but the threshold for this list was anything that was about 35,000 and higher in value. Just looking at the mill and overlay one on the top, this is the main entrance drive from Mansfield. Our landscape architect has done a great job working to manage the new design to basically match existing grades there. So we don't really have any grading going on, adjustment in grading from what there is today. So rather than tear out the entire pavement section of that length and rebuild it, we are looking to get some pavement cores done to verify the depth of the pavement section and determine if we can accept this item. But I'm pretty confident that we will be able to, and do a mill and overlay of that pavement rather than completely tearing out that pavement section and replacing it. So that was worth about $102,000. Replacement of the louvered panel fence and gate next to the service court with chain link fence and plantings. It was a fairly expensive fence that was specified. It, of course, looks nice, but that savings was worth about $125,000. Various locations around the building, we were proposing to provide concrete paving in lieu of pavers. That was worth about $77,000. A few other smaller ones. And by the way, we have graphics to support some of these. I meant to tell you that earlier. That's the portion of this presentation that Amy will be going through after I present these lists, just so you'll be able to see some of the graphics for these elements. So I'm going to jump to some of the larger ones. Elimination of the exterior sunshades at $430,000. That's an item that we think we should take right off the top. We'll show some supporting information for why we think that can be done. We had metal wood look soffit material on the canopies going into the building, and we're suggesting that may be replaced with EIFS, which is basically a simulated stucco type finish, and that's worth $200,000. Elimination of the extended canopy along the bus drop-off is also on the list for about $90,000. We have fritted glass around the building in the courtyard curtain wall and the main entrance curtain wall, and that had a value of about $95,000. And that's something that we can specify as an alternate. So on bid day, if if bids come in favorable and you want to upgrade to include that, we could include that as an alternate, but take it out of the base bid at this time. On the large big box spaces on the bus drop-off side, we have the ombre brick pattern. If we were to go just to the standard red brick for that entire volume on both the kitchen and gym volume, that was worth about $56,000. Barrier One is a concrete admixture product that we sometimes build into concrete slab work. And the reason we put it in there is it inhibits moisture vapor from coming from the ground up through the slab and potentially affecting the bond of finished flooring materials. But because we have the need to put in a waterproofing system for the high groundwater, we felt that we did not need to double up and have that Barrier One product as well. That's worth about $1 a square foot or so on slabs, so that was a pretty large number of $76,000. Custom wall coverings, we had about $65,000 in the estimate of custom wall coverings. This is not all of the wall coverings in the project, but it's a few select areas that we thought we could trim back. Again, this is an item that we feel we can specify as an alternate, take it out of the base bid, but specify it in the project and potentially buy it as an alternate if bids come in favorably. We mentioned the serpentine ceiling. This is the line item for the serpentine ceiling on the previous slide was an adjustment to the unit cost for all of the serpentine ceilings in the project. This line item is to provide a typical flat ACT as acoustic ceiling tile ceiling in the corridors, at cafeteria with a more flat ceiling, and that's worth $60,000. So these are some things that we need to talk with the group about. And then 24-inch high, what is MB, Amy?
Marker boards.
Oh, thank you, marker boards.
Sure.
On the
That's because you missed the that's BI 12 gives a better description.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So in the classrooms, on the teaching wall, we have our standard height marker boards on either side of the interactive whiteboard. And then we had an enhancement for lower marker boards from 3 feet down to the floor. And again, this is something we can bid as an alternate, and we can buy those should bids come in favorable. But on base bid, it's worth $42,000. Music instrument storage cabinets, those oftentimes are bought with the FF&E package, so we pull them out of the base bid contract, and we will buy those through the furniture, fixtures, and equipment budget. And go to the next slide. We have some interior storefront or interior windows in the building that were estimated as aluminum storefront. However, they were intended to be hollow metal frames, which are steel frames instead, and so that had a value of $40,000. Changing the railing for the guardrails at the main stair. Again, we have graphics to show that in a little bit. Aluminum windings in lieu of copper windings in some of the transformers throughout the building. This was something that was worth $50,000. There was a question that got verified by the MEP engineer. There was concern that the aluminum windings may be larger, those transformers may be larger, and they may not fit in the building, but that was proved to be not true. So this is a value that we feel we can confidently take. Conversing with Luke on the platform theatrical lighting, we had an allowance of $50,000 in the budget for a more elaborate theatrical lighting system, which we learned is not necessary in the project. So that's an adjustment there. Lost my feed, Amy. There we go. Thank you. A real large item that we would love to get some direction on from the committee today is changing the cooling approach for the building from the dedicated chillers to what's a DX package, which means direct compression. So it's essentially moving the centralized compressors in the chiller plant to the individual rooftop units where we have individual compressors. And there are certain advantages that you get with this scenario where you distribute your compressors around the building rather than having them centralized. So if you do have an equipment failure at some point in the future with the chiller system, if a chiller goes down, your cooling is affected throughout the entire building, as opposed to the DX system where if you have a localized compressor failure, your cooling is only affected in the area of the unit that area conditions. So, there's trade-offs either way, but it's a substantial savings to eliminate the piping associated with that centralized chiller and go with just distributed compressors of about $830,000. So it's a pretty substantial item. We do have some backup materials to talk about later in the presentation for that. Okay, so miscellaneous items we have. This is something we talked about, I think, last week. $550,000 is the current savings value that the team has identified for the change in the phasing approach of the building. Again, this number is still being evaluated, but this is a number that we feel we can confidently report to the committee. We're all in hopes that this number will go up as we figure out all the logistics of the new phasing plan. But this is a number that we feel it's worth at this point in time. A few other, these are some area reductions of miscellaneous spots. I'm not going to go through each one because Amy's going to go through them in detail in a minute. But in aggregate, those are worth just a couple $100,000, just a quick glance, maybe a little bit more. Bottom line of this list, these large value management items, is $3.9 million. And so that's a substantial number that's going to help bridge the gap on that overage. So in summary, next slide. This is summarizing those previous slides. The budget gap that we're trying to bridge right now is $6.89 million. The estimate adjustments are worth 1.4. The current design team accepted items are worth just under 300,000, and the large value management items are worth about 3.9. If you do that math and sum those four lines, we end up with a remaining budget gap of 1.2. What we did not yet share with the group, and as I mentioned, we have a list that's over 100 items long. This is an aggregate value of the balance of the value management items that Kip had mentioned that we're still working on providing values for. These are all the items that are about $30,000 value or less, but those values are in aggregate as of 6 o'clock last night, which I think that savings value has increased since I put this slideshow together last night. But right now, that's worth about another $1.4 million. So you can see that if we were to accept all of the remaining items, as I mentioned earlier, the team has agreed not to put anything on the list that we didn't feel would be an acceptable thing to accept. Of course, up to the committee to make the final decision. But you can see, I think we could potentially bridge that full gap. Any questions on?
Yeah, Kemp, this is Kip. I had a question on your the last two items are actually additional value management items. When our workshop stopped on Tuesday, there were a lot of items that had not been priced out.
Right.
Are you saying this 1,285,000 is the guesstimate at what all those items might be, plus the smaller 30,000 and lower numbers?
No, in fact, the 1.285 number is what we had populated in the spreadsheet as of 6 o'clock last night. And to give you a sense, there were probably 20 to 25% of the items that still had to be populated with a number.
And Kemp, with that, we spent time on the phone with our estimator this morning, and we did just before the meeting populate a good portion. So I'd say that we're down to maybe about a half a dozen items at the most that are left to be priced.
Okay. Great, thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. So this portion of this summary would need to be updated to reflect that, but it would be going this number, the 1.285 number, will be going up as far as amount of savings available.
Correct. We just don't know what it is yet, but it could be up to 1.5 or maybe a little bit more. We don't know.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And we do have, I have the live spreadsheet open. So if at the end of the meeting there's interest or there's time, we can dive into that. But the big picture for today's meeting is really to look at those big items, which I have graphics for next, and that Kemp just shared.
Okay. So in summary, we don't have to go back and go over the 1.4 million, which is the estimate adjustments total. That's already done.
Correct.
And we don't have to go over the 295,000, which may go up when some more. There's one item that has to be adjusted in there, which is the flooring of the maintenance room, of the mechanical room. That doesn't have to be discussed. What we're really going to be talking about is really that 3.9 million of large value items.
Yes, that would be the best use of our time today, to go through those items and get some direction from the committee.
Fine. Let's keep it focused on that and we'll get going.
All right. Just to provide more information on where some of these items are, Amy's going to run through some graphics, and then we can come back to the list toward the end.
Right. Thanks, Kemp. So this is the site plan that you're all very familiar with. And just to sort of help you graphically see some of the items that Kemp listed, S2 is the milling and reuse of the existing bituminous asphalt here at the entry drive. Because of the way we're grading the site, the entry drive is being graded essentially into the existing grade, so that it doesn't change along this property line and that property line. So since we're not changing the grade significantly, there's potential to mill the existing pavement and reuse it. That's $100,000 savings. At this location, at the bus entrance, we discussed the elimination of the extension, this length under the cursor of the canopy. We would keep a portion of the canopy here at the entry door for weather protection, but it would significantly reduce the cost of that to by about $90,000. And then there's also a little site element that goes with that, which is the reduction of the width of the sidewalk in that location. The sidewalk would only need to match the one on the other side. So then this is, I think, another $7,000 savings. In this area, in the service area and in the cafeteria, there's a significant amount of savings to be had, and I have a blow up of that. Kemp mentioned the back door exit of the exploration zone portion of the library media center. Once we were able to confirm that that door is not required by code, we're able to eliminate an entire ramp and retaining wall structure, which you can see under the cursor in this area. So that was a significant savings as well. One of the items that we suggest is an easy add alternate is the embankment slide. It's a fun way for the students to get to the playground and to really start their experience of the playground up at the level of the building. But it's something that can easily be done as an add alternate to the project. This is the entry, or I should say the access path from the cafeteria exit or the west exit of the building down to the playground and fields level. If we reduce the width of this sidewalk and stair, there's a significant savings there as well. So that's S11.
And Amy, I just want to interrupt here. That S11, eliminating, is it 2 feet width of the entire stairs and coming and walkway?
That's correct. In this plan, you can see it extends all the way from the building down to the playground.
And we so far have only got an estimate of $2,024 in savings, which we know it's got to be greater than that, correct? We're going to still look at that number.
That's right. I wonder if Dave has the spreadsheet open. He might actually have a revised value for that.
Yeah, we did put I do have it open. Let me just scroll up to it, Amy. We did
Thanks.
put another value on it, but again, I think we do have to dive a little deeper into the stair aspect of it. What was the site item number again?
S11.
Yep. So that we've already increased that back up to 7,500, but again, we need to look at that a little more. It could go up even more than that, even probably into a 5-digit credit.
Okay.
Great.
Want me to close things up? Just want to cover that issue.
Hi, this is Diane. I had one quick comment too. If you could just explain in a little more detail the add alternate option and how that might, how that works in terms of carrying an amount that's actually designed into the project, and so everybody can understand how that might be an option for some of these items.
Sure. So alternates are fully designed parts of the project. So in the case of the slide, that's a product that we would be specifying. So it's rather easy for us to include it and in the specification, just label it as an alternate. That requires that the subcontractor who's bidding on that portion of the work put that price as a separate line item. And it allows the committee to make a decision on bid day whether or not they can accept that item. So it'll be completely designed in the project, but it is carried as a separate line item by the contractor.
And one thing I would add to that is that we can also put into the specifications for alternates, we can provide timeframes for when these alternates can be accepted by the committee. They don't necessarily have to be accepted on bid day. Because as the project progresses and you may be using some of your contingency, you may not want to commit yourself to that alternate until a little bit later in the project, and we can put that into the specifications.
Right. This is a good example of one where you could add it much later in the project because the playground might not be built until the end of phase 2. So you have a couple of years to find out how the project's going, how your contingency is holding up, and then what you can comfortably add to the project. We also recommend this garden as an add alternate.
This is Katie. Is it possible to have to show what the cost savings would be for all of these items that we're talking about on the same page, just so as we go through them, we know what their dollar values are?
I can flip back and forth, but I don't have it in the same document, Katie, because that's a Excel file that ONGAP have also been updating.
Okay, are you able to just maybe mention it as you say S5 and just give the amount?
Amy, if you want, I have it open on mine. That way you don't have to flip back and forth. If you want to just query me as to saying, all right, what's the current value we're holding? We could I could feed that to you so you don't have to keep going back and forth.
I think that's great. Does that help, Katie?
That's great. Thank you so much.
Sure. So we already talked about S11 is about a $7,500 savings currently and still being looked at because the stairs as an item on their own might be even greater value savings. In addition to that, we had some curved stairs in the design. And so that those stairs allowed someone to, or the students to sit on the stairs and look at this flat lawn area, perhaps as a small teaching space or just a gathering space for a group for reading or whatever. In lieu of the curved stairs, you could have just regular stairs coming from this level, and students could sit on the hillside, and that's S12. So Dave, do you know the savings for that?
Yep. Sorry, I was copying it over to a separate spot because I thought I was providing them all together. But the south side, it's $9,500.
So that's just to eliminate the curved stairs and have a straight run. S6B represents the plaza area outside of the kitchen or cafeteria seating. And S6B is a value management item for regular concrete sidewalk in lieu of pavers. We don't have S6 broken down into square footage at this time, but there's an aggregate total for all of S6 at $77,000, which would be changing all of the pavers at the entries and patio into concrete sidewalk. So some portion of that $77,000 savings is at this patio. There are other portions of that sprinkled around the building at the bus entry, at the main entrance entry point, and at the patio outside of the lobby into the courtyard, among others. S18 is a suggestion to go to heavy duty asphalt or bituminous paving rather than concrete at the service area. I would suggest that that's a sort of easy item to take, as long as Mike agrees that heavy duty bituminous can work for the school system at the service area.
And Amy, that is one that we are currently pricing still. I don't have a number for you on that today.
Okay.
This is Mike Lynch. That works fine for us to change. No problem.
That's wonderful. Thank you. The BE26 and S16 are a two-step value management. BE26 is for the value of this blue portion of wall, which is currently an extension of the kitchen wall, all in brick, hiding the service area. So it's a very solid wall, 7 or 8 feet tall. And a BE26 is to go from brick to a Metco metal screen. Is that correct, Dave?
Yes, that's approximately $12,000.
And then to further reduce that from the metal screen down to a vinyl coated chain link fence is another value management item. And I believe that's S16.
S16. Yeah, we are still working on that.
Okay.
That
And-
was S16. Yeah, the brick screen around the service court and provide planted buffer, right?
Right. So yes, there's multiple steps. So, and then S3, A and B are to go from the metal solid fencing material to chain link, and then further reduced from chain link to just plantings. And I think in discussion a few days ago with some of the members of the building committee, we talked about their desire to have vinyl coated chain link there.
And that's $126,000 for 3A.
Thank you. So a significant amount of savings just by changing the material. And then you'll see in the renderings that there's plantings here. So when you're at the cafeteria, even though this metal fence will be a reduced value, will still really be hidden by the plantings.
This is Katie again. Sorry, Amy, could you and Dave just go back and give the dollar amounts for S4 and S5, please?
Sure. I know that S5 we don't have yet, Katie, because the playground manufacturer gave us a total price for all of the playground equipment, not just one item. But I did ask Jessica for that today. So let me just quickly check my emails and see if she came back to me on it.
That's fine, whenever you get it. Thank you.
Mhm.
Dave, do you have the number for the garden S4?
S4 is 11,300.
And Jessica is checking on the embankment slide. If her memory is correct, it's $17,000. So other areas that we looked at in order to save money is to tighten up the building footprint. This helps in a number of ways. It straightens some of the exterior walls and reduces the linear feet of exterior wall. It also, obviously, it decreases the overall total area of the building. And it also helps to alleviate the complexity of forming the foundation walls with ins and outs. So in looking at that, we were talking about what areas can we absorb into the building without losing any program area. And so I'll just walk through the main level here and talk about some of those areas in dark blue where we're suggesting to move them entirely out of the footprint of the building, create that space within the building. So for example, at the main entrance, we had a vestibule that stuck out from the lobby area that addressed and went into the courtyard. If we take this, sorry, can't click. If we take this blue area and absorb it into the inside of the building, we'll work on this so that the lobby itself is an appropriate shape and size. But this is just a graphic representation of how we can transform the vestibule that was an outie into an inner vestibule for energy savings, but still allow for a generous lobby area and main entrance. The same thing can happen here at the ELP Commons. We had a vestibule out into the courtyard at that location. We can absorb it into the common room, minimize it in size so that it's still appropriate for the energy code requirement to have exit and entrance vestibules, but still allow the ELP Commons to have its appropriate program area. In this location, we have a 2-story volume of a speech teaching room and also the gifted students room, IDEA. And we're suggesting that on both floors, we take this whole portion of building and absorb it into what I call the knuckle of the academic wing. There's a space there that was planned for breakout spaces, reading nook, that kind of thing. And it has a beautiful connection in glass to the other side of the courtyard. But if we were to put those rooms in this area and still provide some glass wall on the front of that, the view could be maintained, but the room could be used for those services that were previously here. At the lower level, there's a vestibule, one of the two entrances to the courtyard from this lower level, that we could absorb into the footprint of the building at a location where custodial storage room is oversized currently, over program area, I should say. That's one option. Alternatively, we could look at moving this 2-story volume of, I believe those are speech rooms also, but I could be wrong. They're in offices of some kind.
Correct. Those
Okay.
are, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so those 2 speech rooms could be absorbed into the building, and what we would do is displace, for example, this data room, which is a back of house space, and the custodial storage room, and then we would need to find locations for those rooms, which we could carve out of other spaces, tighten the electrical rooms, tighten other storage rooms, that kind of thing. That one's a little bit more difficult, but I think still achievable. These others that I described within the courtyard are very easy for us to make that change.
If I can, hi, this is Luke. Just if I can offer one thought about the possible relocation of a speech room.
Mhm.
The ones indicated that would potentially move to the light blue area, my concern is that speech therapy does require, and I know we haven't gotten into the detail around the acoustic treatment of all these spaces, but I would just want to be mindful of the placement of those rooms in a way that we're not increasing ambient noise between whether it's bathrooms or 2 classrooms. So the current position, I understand if there's a way to do it that reduces the envelope of the building, but just in rethinking their location, I'd ask to be, higher consideration for acoustics for those particular therapy sessions.
That's a very great, good comment. And so we will keep that in mind, Luke. Perhaps the program area of speech in that condition, in that case, it gets switched with another room. We have material storage here, for example, that could be a more quiet zone for a speech classroom. And we could maybe put a conference room or something here. We could adjust that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Hey, Amy, it's Duke. You're probably going to go to the graphics. I guess my only reaction is I like the overall thought process. It's just on that entrance foyer. I just would hate to think it looks like it's crammed in there, or we valued engineered it, especially in that area as you come into the school. And I think as we try to figure out what schools look like in the new normal next year with COVID, having more open space is better than not. So particularly the entrance lobby there, I know you'll figure it out and probably have a good look and feel, but that's just one thing that concerns me on moving that inside there.
Sure. Yeah, we're very conscious of that too, Duke. And so I just want to make sure that everyone understands this light blue box is really meant as a placeholder, just to show how we know that lobby is generous sized and we can work with it. But you're right, we do want to make sure that when you walk in the building, you're not faced with another wall. So we want to make sure that it feels comfortable.
Yeah, and I don't know if I missed it. I had to take an emergency call, but is there a cost associated with that you've looked at already?
Yes, and so I think maybe Dave, this is a good page for you to go ahead and describe each of those.
Sure. So if we're looking at the vestibule from the lobby to the courtyard, that's miscellaneous number 3. That's about $42,000. And I think that's probably on the conservative side too, because looking at the elevations, it is a higher space of all curtain wall. So I could almost see that going up to at least the $50,000 range for that item.
And Dave, while we're on this sheet, why don't you go ahead and describe the cost savings associated with the other miscellaneous areas?
Sure. So I'll state it, Amy, and then you kind of maybe highlight which one it is to put it in perspective. The other one says absorb area of vestibule from lower level south corridor to courtyard into the oversized custodial storage.
So I'm circling that with the cursor if you can see it on the left side of the image.
That's about $39,000. Oh, you know what though? No, that's not. That's about $20,000 because I think the square we realized the square footage was different there.
Okay. Still $20,000 is a good amount of savings, I think, for that item.
Yep. I'm just making a note in the sheet there, Amy, of that correction that I just made. The size of the vestibule from ELP Commons to the courtyard and pull face of the exterior wall flush with the adjacent. Right, that's about $45,000.
Mm-hmm.
Again, right in that, could be upwards of another $50,000. Similar to the one for at the entry on the north side of the courtyard. So between those two alone, you're almost between $90,000 and $100,000.
Mm-hmm. And then I bet there's a significant savings for this one, which is the gifted the two-story volume change.
Volume of the speech and idea absorbent corridor. Yeah, that's $92,000.
So, right. So here we're at we're at $200,000 if you include the vestibule change for those savings. Mm-hmm. There's a minor savings given. I forgot to mention this one, which is just to pull back the wall of the platform area to align it with the vestibule wall that's here anyway. It allows that portion of the building to read as one, and you'll see that in a rendering coming up. We offset that loss of square footage at the north end of the platform by adding it to the south end. So there's really no program area lost again, but you are removing this portion of square footage from the building itself.
And the estimated savings for that item is $16,000.
Okay. So if everyone feels comfortable with understanding these plan changes, I'm going to move on. And this is an image that shows you what it would look like to change the, I'll call it the Audi vestibule at the ELP and push it back to the face of the building, aligning the exterior wall, cleaning up the foundation plan, cleaning up the roof plan, and still allowing for a full comfortable wall of glass at the ELP Commons. And it's still obviously the entrance signifying a more important space, or something that someone still can see as a good eye catcher from the courtyard. So I hope that helps you understand what that visual would be, in addition to the $50,000 savings. Okay, moving on. This is a similar visual where the bump of the vestibule to the lobby is reduced, so that tall wall pushes back and addresses only the lobby entrance, and you'll see that the facade here is cleaned up and reduced. It gives more space at the patio area, but it also square footage savings calculated at 45,000, right, Dave?
Yeah, and again, I think, Amy, that with the height of that, I think we're looking definitely more in the $50,000 range than the $42,000 range on that.
Great. So something else that we were looking at is that this railing system, which shows up here in the courtyard and again at the main stair in the interior of the building. This was a product selected, a really beautiful product from a European company called Bach Modern, but that comes at a price. And if we were to replace that Bach Modern railing system with a custom picket rail, Dean sketched this, the other day. So you see that in the bottom right-hand corner. We're still trying to maintain the look of the trees or natural environment, but done with regular metal picket railing parts and pieces. There was a savings on S7 given for that one, right, Dave?
S7, sorry.
Mhm.
S7, yep, it's about $40,000.
Yeah, 38.5 plus.
Great. And then the other thing that you get a little peek of and a hint of here in this image is eliminating the sunshades at these windows in both the ELP classrooms and in the art room and OTP room, which are here on the left side of the image. In this bubble at the right side, you can see that the windows still exist. The sunshade has been removed, and in total, the sunshades is over $400,000 value to remove from the project.
This is Katie. Amy, are you able to just speak briefly about what the impact of removing the sunshades will have on the light inside the classrooms?
I am. So just be patient to one more slide, and then I'll show you that.
Okay, great.
So at the classroom pods, this is just a quick image showing you the same thing, that upon removal of the sunshades, you have the integrity of the classroom pod still showing up as a savings. So the look of the building is changed slightly, but now as I move on, here's what we learned from Thornton Tomasetti when they did the analysis with shading and without shading. They recommended that we take this value management item, and they're saying that removing exterior shading does not increase hours of glare for most of the classroom. It only has a marginal difference at the window. And so I'm hard pressed to tell the difference, but I think that the bright yellow line does come further into the classroom by a very negligible amount. But it's definitely such a high value savings that I think we have to recommend it. It just.
Excuse me, this is Dan. Is there a change in the temperature of the classroom?
The sunshades was really not anything that would have affected the energy modeling because there was a daylighting strategy. The window glazing that we've selected has a high enough U value and reflectance coating that the heat and cooling of the building is controlled with the glazing.
This is Rusty. It will affect the heating a little bit, but what I am mostly concerned about is that the upper side of the sunshade of the light shelves, and they're used to reflect daylighting into the classrooms, and particularly to get into the far part of the classrooms. I don't think the school at this point has enough daylighting. And there are numerous studies out there that will tell you that kids will learn faster, behave better, all this other benefits other than just financial benefits to increasing daylighting here. We've already pulled out most of the skylights, which is the best way to get daylighting into any building. And by eliminating these shades / light shelves, you're cutting daylighting even more, and it will have a negative effect on the learning capabilities of the kids. I know it's a big number, but we're down to not a lot of daylighting coming into this school, and every school that I've seen tries to get as much daylighting inside as they possibly can.
100% agree with you, Rusty. And if I can just address that, the exterior sunshades actually reduce the amount of light coming in. They don't improve it. But you're right, there is another item on the value management list that's the interior light shelf. Those interior light shelves carry a much lower cost savings value, but they are listed. And I think Dave can probably find that on the list for us. It's a BI number. I'm sorry, I don't know which number it is.
No,
off the
that's
top of
fine.
my head.
I'll
Okay.
find it.
Great. So while you're looking for that, that item does reflect daylight into the room, reflects it off of the white ceiling. So that's one that would contribute to the daylighting that you're talking about.
Right.
Um,
It's significant.
That it could be, yeah. And that, so the exterior sunshades.
Well, I'm talking about the exterior ones. That's where you're going to get a heck of a lot more light reflected into the building than the interior ones.
No, actually, these exterior ones actually limit the amount of light getting into the building. The interior light shelf reflects it further into the space.
But the exterior ones reflect it through the top part of the window. That's why they're down further, and it bounces off the shelf up to the ceiling and over to the interior part of the classrooms. That's how those work, the exterior ones. Yes, you are shading the close. I'm in the business.
Okay. The interior light shelves are doing that job, though, in this case. We do have interior light shelves that are doing that job, bouncing it on. If I go back a slide, hold on.
Amy, I don't think we are proposing to eliminate the interior light shelves.
Oh, okay, great.
I think we agreed those needed to stay into the in the project.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Kemp. I agree. It's not on the list.
Okay, thank you. So the interior light shelves align with this higher window right here. And so the light comes in, bounces off the interior light shelf and reflects onto the ceiling. The exterior light sunshade is when the light is coming in at an angle, it reduces the glare inside the classroom.
But the top part of that shelf, maybe you can have Tomasetti look at it. The top part of the light, that shelf, shade, better reflects more light in than the interior one. And I'd
We'll
like
have to look at that because I don't know if we selected one that did that because this is slats. This is not a solid white shelf. So I don't know if that's the case. But we'll look at that. Yeah,
that's exactly correct, Amy. The shape of the blade is designed for shading of the window. It is not designed for bouncing light back into the top window, which is why we added the interior light shelf to do exactly what Rusty is saying. That interior light shelf is what transmits the light into the room. The exterior light shelf was designed to shade the window.
Correct, but can we have Tomasetti look at the ones that do both? Exterior ones, that's the way we've always done them.
We can look at that, but of course the exterior ones are much more expensive. And so if we can get the light reflected into the building from an interior gypboard white shelf, that would be less costly, more cost effective. I do have Thornton Tomasetti's recommendation about daylighting and what percentage of wall they recommend that we keep for daylighting. So I have that on my other screen. I can flip to it if we need it later.
And Rusty, this is Kemp. We'll do a section study just to illustrate what's currently designed, and then we can have that conversation.
As we've eliminated skylights and now we will cut back on the amount of light. I was under the assumption that those exterior ones were also, acting as reflecting the light in. So I'd like to take a look at it, because again, I go back to the educational experience. We want to get as much daylighting in here as we can.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm a big proponent of that as well. So I do agree that we want to maintain as much daylight as possible in the classrooms. And just as a point of reference, the skylights are not planned for any teaching spaces. The skylights were always planned as a highlight for some common areas in the corridors. But the teaching spaces will not be affected by any decisions about the skylight.
Right. I mean, but the original design had a whole bunch of skylights on it way back when.
Right, but never in the classrooms. Yeah, because there's a lot of glare that comes from skylights. And half of the classrooms are on the lower level.
I think you'll recall too, Rusty, that we shared a study that we had done with regards to the amount of fenestration for each classroom, and that 35% was kind of the magic number. Anything over that created undue glare and began to draw a higher need to condition the room. If you did a 30-foot wide classroom with 30 feet of glass, that exceeded over 50% of the exterior wall of glazing. It provided no more benefit than the 35%, which is about where we stand right now.
Right. So I just switched what's on the screen. I think you can see this. This was at the time of schematic design when we were going from one amount of square footage of light to another, and I can't remember the percentages that we had before, but we can have Thornton Tomasetti redo the daylight study that you see on the screen, and then we can also have them, I'm going to move this now, take a look at with and without the exterior sunshades.
Right. I don't want to belabor the point. We have to move on here. But the newer types of skylights have zero glare. Just so you know.
That's, well, yeah, depending upon what glazing you select, that's certainly true of everything. So that's a wonderful development. We're lucky to have that. Okay, so moving on, at the bus entry, you'll recall that there's an almost $90,000 savings by eliminating the portion of canopy that is along the face of the gymnasium and reducing the scope of, or the complexity of the canopy at the entry itself. So going to a modest canopy that matches others around the building, and then pulling this wall back where the platform is as a part of that building area reduction that we talked about. This is sort of the look that we'd be seeing in comparison at that location. There's also a little savings by going from concrete pavers at this area to the typical concrete sidewalk.
Amy, or actually, sorry, Dave, what was the cost savings for BE11?
That was a little over, once you put the markups on it, that's between $90,000 and $95,000.
Thank you.
This is some savings that we can find by reducing the height of the cafeteria. This drops the roof level of the cafeteria by 3 feet. And you can see that it really doesn't change the importance of the cafeteria, I don't think, when you look at the renderings side by side. And it's just a pure savings in volume of building and height of exterior wall. The other saving that you can see
We just finished pricing that one this morning, Amy. That's between 40 and 45,000 for that reduction in height.
Thank you. And then also eliminating the west canopy is one of the options. By removing this canopy, you do lose the weather protection at that door, but that savings, B13, what was that one, Dave?
It's about 12,000.
Okay. There's a cost savings in changing the fenestration at the administration area. All around the building, we have a brick soldier course that runs at the head of the windows. That's true at the ELP and at the classroom areas. But at the administration area, we dressed it up a bit and had cast stone, sort of more of a traditional looking fenestration at the window heads. But by eliminating that cast stone and carrying the brick soldier course at this location, there's a savings BE23. Do you have that one, Dave?
Amy, we're looking at this one this morning, but I think our number is understated because by doing this means we no longer have precast at any, or no, we no longer have cast stone at any of the window heads, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so I think we had thought it was, we thought there were some other locations in the building. So I believe our number of 15,000 is understated, and it's likely that that's probably more of like a $25,000 to $30,000 savings.
Okay, great. That's good news today. More to consider for the committee. This one, I just wanted to give you a graphic representation of what it means to accept the MEP item number 21, which is to go to DX cooling instead of chillers. One of the changes that would be noticeable would be that on the rooftop, you would no longer have the large chillers that sat behind the gym roof or the gym height wall over top of the library area. So those go away. The piping back and forth to the chillers goes away. And that's why that savings is so significant. What would happen is each of the air handling units on the classroom areas would be enlarged, not really noticeably from the point of view of the ground, but each one of them would have their own cooling capacity within it. So as you can see here, there are 7, I believe, air handling units, no, more than that.
Amy, also associated with
8.
that is a reduction in structure and slab depth underneath that, or deck depth underneath that chiller to support the dunnage, and ironically, even the dunnage, which you would remove as well, which I think contributes to the price of that item.
Thanks, Dean. Yep, that's true. I know that one of the areas that ONG included in their cost estimate when valuing that VE item is the reduction from a concrete pad that sat underneath this chiller as well. So at the roof level, that's a big savings.
Amy, this is Kemp. One other advantage of removing those chillers is to increase the amount of roof area for solar panels as well.
Thank you. Good point. So I wanted to remind everyone of the current design for the cafeteria and the corridor adjacent to the cafeteria, which runs all the way up the ramp alongside the gymnasium. We have a serpentine ceiling. The savings of $130,000 or so was that the original pricing that was assumed for the ceiling was about double what it really is, because it's a product from Armstrong. It's not a custom design. So once we established what the real value is, it still is a much more expensive ceiling than if you went to a flat, typical acoustic ceiling tile, drop ceiling. So there is still more savings to be had if you were to eliminate the curving ceiling. And so we priced it as two separate pricing options, B10 and B11, where you could make a choice to have just the corridor go to a flat ceiling, or just the cafeteria go to a flat ceiling, or both.
Yep. So BI 10, which is to take the ceiling at the cafeteria entrance corridor and ramp and replacing with ACT, that was a $35,000+ savings. And then the cafeteria itself was approximately $60,000, 60. And that was based upon the per square foot adjustment that we already capitalized on in BI 9.
Great. There's some reductions that I think are still being priced.
Can I just comment on that?
Sure, sorry.
I know that, like, I know that every significant amount means a lot, but there's some parts of this building that really sort of set it apart a little bit. Otherwise, I'd like to see, like, is that just going to be like a box cafeteria? It really does set it apart in some ways. Now, I know I'm stating the obvious, and I know the challenge is to get down to where we got to get down to, but there's just different parts of the building that it may not programmatically, instructionally have an impact there, but it just is. It's just a bit of character about the building. Anyway, that would be nice to maintain if we could. But having said that, it's probably stating the obvious.
Hey, it's Duke. I'll just add to Dr. Adley's comments, having gone through this up at the high school, where the high school almost looked like an afterthought when it was all said and done. And while we needed more capacity, we spent a lot of time on the look and feel, which involves dollars and cents, but doing some stuff to the ceiling, which helped acoustically and gave an overall pop as an area where students gather and meet and have some downtime. I just think it's something to consider, to Alan's point. Thank you.
This is Kemp. We agree that, that this change would impact the design, and this is a potential area where we could have an alternate as well. An alternate for a revised ceiling would take a little bit more work to have two distinctly designed ceilings, but it is an area where we could maintain the curved ceiling as an alternate as well.
I'd also like to add that whatever we choose to use here, whether it is flat ceilings or not, we would design that to be a dynamic space. I think it could have the same amount of drama and impact on this space, even if these were flat planes. We could make them look like clouds or lily pads. I mean, there's a myriad of different ways. I don't think, Dr. Adley, this would just be a flat ceiling boom that went across the space, that we would spend every effort designing the less expensive version than we did with the curvature. I think it's, like I said, we would never shy away from kind of giving it our due diligence and our design touch.
Thank
you. Make that a dramatic space.
Thanks.
In areas such as the Learning Commons, the ELP Commons, and a couple of locations in the Library and Media Center, we're showing a built-in bench and surrounding built-in shelves. In the example of the Learning Commons, we're also showing a couple of built-in countertops. If we were to reduce some of these in cost and replace them with alternatives, like in the case of this countertop, provide tables as furniture, that would be a cost savings, because the millwork price is more expensive than the furniture price for that item. And then here, I think Kemp, you had an idea for reducing the cost of the built-ins around the bench.
Right. We're still evaluating this. We're actually still, conceiving of what this actually is, but you've kind of captured it there, Amy, with instead of four on the sides where those are bookshelves, instead of four individual pockets, maybe we make one full height recess and provide adjustable shelves in that. We're still kind of conceiving of what that is, but to still get the effect, but not have so much labor to create four individual pockets. I think there would be some savings there. And then this is duplicated 6 or 7 times throughout the building. So whatever individual instance savings we have, we can multiply it times the number of occurrences.
Right. Yeah, I think it's at least 8 times in the building.
And in turn with that, we're going to have to refine our number. We increased it from what it previously was, but I think, as we have a discussion about some options there, we can better hone in on what we believe the savings is for that item.
Right. So, our objective is to maintain the same functionality and ability to have books stored within the Learning Commons, just address it slightly differently.
I agree, Kemp. I think that's one that you can almost achieve the exact same look that you've got in the rendering in a more simplistic fashion.
I think too, it's Duke, just, and I think we are, as we go through this, keep in mind, I think these spaces become probably more important as we go into whatever social distancing or spacing looks like. I think even though we're a couple of years out, there'll be a lasting impact as to spacing and distancing. So I think these spaces become probably a little more important.
I agree. I think that the generosity of the corridor outside of the classrooms is one that will be a huge advantage at this school.
Yeah, and instructionally, this is a tremendous space and a tremendous resource to sort of maintain as best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're not recommending reducing this in size or ability at all. Just trying to find less expensive ways to produce the same result.
I think it's wise. And the only thought I have, and I'm sure that Amanda and the interior design team would be considering, the tables, if we're moving to movable furniture, keeping in mind the ability to kind of maneuver those tables in a way and design, if we're taking out the millwork, that you can flexibly move around and maintain appropriate distancing and flexibility in that space. Otherwise, I think it's a smart move to go in that direction.
Thanks. Yes, we'll make sure of that. And also the furniture has to go through the same rigorous design review at the state as the construction documents do in terms of accessibility. So you'll notice that even in our furniture plans, you'll end up with clear passages for wheelchair accessibility and the like. Okay. The next couple of slides are not showing too much in terms of a change, but something that I wanted to show so that you're comfortable with a couple of the other items on the list. The light fixtures that are selected for the lobby is a specialty pendant fixture, round in shape, glowing fixture. And we were talking with the electrical engineer and the lighting rep, and he suggested a very similar fixture in look. The light output is also the same, so the quality of light, the photometrics in the space would be equivalent, but it's a different manufacturer. The size and the options for finishes is reduced because it's more of a commodity, but this fixture represents a savings of somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000, I believe, in MEP item 3B. Has that been priced, Dave? maybe you're on mute.
I'm on mute, definitely on mute. Yep. At least that's why I like to keep the camera on. So when you see my lips moving and nothing coming out, you know I'm trying to talk. 3B, 20, 28, 29,000.
Super.
Based
So
on
again,
40% reduction.
right. Yeah. So what we're looking at is just trying to select a fixture that gives the same amount of emphasis and importance to the space. So that's some sort of an easy solution, but has a good value. And the same goes for this location at the stair. We had selected sort of stick design, floating sticks that glow with light, and sort of looking with the lighting rep at options and hearkening back to the lobby, which is just beyond in the, you know, so you'd be walking from the lobby and then next hit this stair and main office. What if we went to a round fixture there by the same sort of less expensive manufacturer and still fill that same volume of space with an exciting light fixture design? So it's not necessarily finalized on this, but I just wanted to let you know that we are committing in that MEP savings to a reduction in cost, but not in look, aesthetics. And then there's the savings on the railing mentioned in the exterior version, and again showing up at this main stair. BI 23 in this case is the savings. So Dave, you probably have a value on that.
You're muted, David.
I'm muted, thanks. Sorry, I was trying to get some other pricing for in there. I wasn't paying attention. Which item?
BI 23.
BI 23. Sounds like we're playing bingo.
Right.
The metal picket at the main stair, 39 with markup 40,000.
Okay. So I think that's the end of my slide. It is. So those are some of the major pricing options that we wanted to review with you. I'm happy to go through and help you understand any other value management items that you might have questions about, or review some of these that we've shown today. Any questions?
Amy, I'd like to see whether we can, at least as a committee, check off some of the bigger items that make sense to us now. I know there's some questions that should be resolved, and I think that people need a chance to sort of think through many of the suggested changes. But if I may, I'd like to sort of see if we can get an agreement, at least on some of them, some of the bigger items. And I'm going to start by talking about the change to the HVA system, which is over 800,000. Probably when you add all the 12%, you're at $900,000, and that is going to the DX system versus the previous design. Would anybody have an objection to adopting that particular savings?
Amy,
has Mike Lynch been consulted further on this at all, or?
Yes, Mike was in a meeting with us on Tuesday where Eric Romeo from CES joined us and further explained the system.
I don't believe Mike was on that call though.
Yeah, this is Mike. I had to leave that meeting early. I had another meeting with the school.
Oh,
so
okay.
I didn't see his presentation, but I've thought about it, and there will be an increase in utility cost. There will be a decrease in district maintenance. And so that comes closer to being a wash item, and it's such a large item, you can't ignore it. So I would say go for it.
Mike, I also want to say that it was confirmed that it is a 4-pipe system, which is one of our major objectives, right?
The original system was going to be a 4-pipe system. This will just be 2-pipe. It'll be heating, supply and return on heating. The air conditioning will be done electrically.
Correct. It'll provide us the same flexibility as a 4-pipe system. Right. Though it's technically not. It gives us the same intent as a 4-pipe.
Okay,
right. You don't have to shut one off to run the other. So
that's
one of the operational aspects that I was taking into consideration.
Right.
And Mike, just one other note, item to note, I guess would be, it does come with package controls, which I think was an initial requirement that we said we would not accept, but obviously I think it might be a concession we have to make at this point.
Yeah, they come with the package controls. I spoke to ABS about that, and our Allerton vendor, and he said they have workarounds for the package controls. Even if it's just giving a signal to the unit to go ahead and do your thing, it's fine with them.
That's good to hear. Thanks for checking in with the controls manufacturer.
Amy, this is Kim. Could you just provide the information on the annual cost increase? I think it was around $3,500 a year differential.
That's correct.
Did we confirm that was
annual?
Yearly or? Okay.
Yes,
Yes.
that was confirmed to be an annual cost, additional cost.
Mhm.
So the payback, on the value management item of $850,000 or so is a long time. I don't even know the number. of years.
Amortized over 100 years.
Okay, so we've agreed upon that one, everybody. Why don't we take some of the site ones that we feel comfortable with, or if people don't feel comfortable, we should hear about it. I think
Amy,
that go ahead.
Amy, can you put on the list the large value management items list up again?
Yeah, that would be helpful. Thanks.
There we go.
There you go. And this includes the site ones that I think is where Kip wanted to go next.
Well, I just wanted to go through some of them quickly. S2, the milling and overlay of the main entry would be great, provided that Duke's comment about the excessive trucks and traffic over the road don't end up causing material damage. And you're going to do that by bore samplings to see how strong or how deep that road is right now. So that's a good one if we can do it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and what's the feasibility? Do we have any new utilities or services coming down that main line that are going to get trenched and torn that up, or
just natural gas?
We do have the new services for electrical, and the new replaced water line will be in the shoulders of the road, Nick.
Okay.
The next one, louvered panel fence and gate with chain link fence and plantings. That's going around the service area. I mean, am I right? That's the service area one?
That's correct.
Correct.
I mean, when we discussed it on Tuesday, our concern was that it was going to be with just plantings at first, but then the answer was, no, we're going to have a chain link fence. It'll be green, vinyl covered, but there'll be plantings in front of the fence, at least on the cafeteria end. So it will be well disguised, but the children cannot go through it. That's the whole point.
Correct.
That's correct.
And you're replacing.
That's represented by the yellow line here, yellow dashed
Correct.
line. Mhm.
Does anybody object to that as a savings, as against, was it a louvered metal fence before?
Yes.
Correct. It was a louvered metal fence that was much more solid looking than a chain link.
This is
Anybody
Kate.
have?
I just
Go
want
ahead,
to
Katie.
say that I just want to emphasize how important I think the plantings would be in order to prevent a sort of institutional feel that aging chain link fences can have. So, as long as, the landscaping screening is not going to be cut, then I would be okay with making that change.
I would agree with you, Katie. I think it's essential.
Thanks for pointing that out. And it reminded me to go to this slide. It's distant and in the background here, but you can see that Jessica has selected evergreens for that area. And even though the fence was rendered here as a solid fence, it's obscured. So I think going to the chain link is a good decision insofar as it'll be hidden at this location.
The chain link fence disappears with the right plantings, whether it's hemlock or arborvitae. It grows right through it, which is kind of the look you want anyhow.
Right.
Amy, your slide with the your panel with the reduction of the slide also shows some plantings when you're looking back up the hill, which is a good look.
Thank you. You're right. There you go.
You can begin to see, you can begin to see the very pale gray behind there, which is the more dense fence. To Katie's point, I think you're looking more at the shrubbery than you are at the fence itself. So we were saying that that fence could, in fact, to Duke's point, become much more transparent, and it was the plantings that were helping to provide the screening, and then the fence to provide the actual enclosure.
Right.
So given all that, are we all in favor of this one?
Yes.
Yes.
And in this particular picture, Kip gets to go down the slide first.
Thanks very much, Duke. Yeah.
Head first.
Now, let's go back to our other big ones, if we can. Okay, so providing concrete versus pavers. I'm having a hard time understanding what the difference is, but it sounds to me like if you can do it for less, concrete's pretty good. But anybody have a point of view on that one?
Hey, this is Sean.
Go ahead.
Hey, it's Sean. I was going to say, from Mike Lynch's point of view, I think I'd rather see concrete there anyway for the wintertime maintenance, because with the pavers, they're going to move up and down at some point over history, and it's going to be more difficult to shovel and remove winter debris. And I would prefer to see the concrete myself. I mean, maybe there's an alternative where you can dye some of the different concrete pads, but I like the concrete better. That's my 2 cents.
At $77,000 worth of 2 cents. Thank you.
Hi, this is Diane. Does Mike Lynch have can he weigh in on that?
Yeah. I've had concrete where it's called Bowmanite, where they put a dye in it, and it's before it settles all the way, you overlay it with a pattern. You pull it up, it looks like brick. Looks like brick pavers, but it is concrete, 6-inch thick concrete. I worked in White Plains. The city did a lot of their sidewalks that way. It was substantially less expensive than pavers. It was more expensive than a regular concrete sidewalk, but you didn't have to worry about the individual stones heaving up and everything else. I mean, just as an example, we just had to redo the pavers that were the walkways at the high school, which were installed correctly, but they lasted 15 years with the traffic. So I'm in favor of eliminating them.
So Amy and Kemp, maybe we, well, I will let the committee talk, but, it sounds like maybe that there's an option for a middle ground with some stamped concrete in isolated areas that should not be much of an increase.
I agree.
Seeing those options.
Yeah, this is Diane. I was just going to say, I think particularly at the main entrance and the gym entrance, it might be nice to delineate a change of some sort as part of the identification of the entry and maybe even underfoot as well. But I would definitely support something that's more maintenance free and an alternative, a less expensive alternative.
We actually, I think, had it as an ad alternate at the high school, and we wound up stamping the asphalt, the black asphalt, for the dining tables and painting it a different color, and it just breaks it up enough. So to your point, Diane, I think we talked about this the other day, just to break up the amount of cement, maybe a stamping color might be a good ad alternative as we go through this process.
If you want to see an example of that, go down Camp Avenue into Springdale, where they redid the roadways and the sidewalks about a year ago, and they used concrete and stamped it. And I mean, even the crosswalks, as I said, and they look great, and it's concrete.
I'm hearing that we're going to do that one. S6.
Yes.
With regard to S7, the metal picket fence, which Dean designed, we have the similar savings on the exterior guardrails, which is up at the in the courtyard area. Similar number of savings for the stairwell interior. Now, you may want to think about that, the look, before you decide on that, and maybe you want another week to think about that. But it's a total of twice this number in terms of using the same fencing design in both locations in terms of savings. So you're upwards of $80,000 plus the 12%. I am not going to push that one if people would like to have more time on that one.
This is Diane. I definitely support it, although it'd be nice to see a sample, see some images, a photograph of it beyond the graphics displayed.
So there's not going to be a photograph, Diane, because it is a custom design, but we can work on a more realistic rendering, if that'll help.
This is Katie. I just want to say that I really liked this idea as a concept of bringing that element in, and I appreciate the drawings that Dean worked up for the custom fence. And I'm encouraged. I think that looks like an option that we could still get that same feel with the savings. So thanks for that, Dean.
You're welcome, Katie. Thank you.
So do people want to decide on that now, or want to defer and have a little more time to think about it?
I'm good with it.
Yeah, I'm good with it. Fine. This is Diane. Yep.
I would approve the change.
Good with it.
All right, then let's lock it in for both this one and the interior one, okay?
Yep, sounds good.
I'm not sure what this next one is. Reduce curtain wall. This was already this is a done deal. No, what is this? BE.
So that's
1A.
one that we hadn't decided on it yet, but essentially we're recommending the art room and OTP room have the same window pattern as the typical classrooms.
Well, let's go on because we haven't looked at that in terms of how it looks. Let's not decide on that now if we can. And then BE2 is replace curtain wall for all punched openings with storefront. Not clear on that one either.
Amy,
do the drawings illustrate that?
There is a sketch, Amy, that I sent you yesterday with the art room and the OTPT room.
Amy, you had showed us a week or so ago, or we had this conversation, because I said I liked the look of the wall, but the windows just start to look like the rest of the building, just more uniform, rather than just the big pop-out curtain wall, if I remember correctly from your slide.
That's correct.
Exactly right, yeah.
Right. I didn't have a formal rendering of that, but I'm just looking at my emails on the other screen now. So give me a second.
I would defer on the exterior sunshades until we get the question that Rusty asked answered, so that we know exactly what we're talking about in terms of the amount of reflective interior light. And if these sunshades are basically not providing much bounce lighting up to the ceiling, then we can consider this. But let's get that question answered first. I think BE10, you just decided that was a better material or a less expensive material, and it would still keep a very attractive look. I can see no reason not to do that one. Does anyone have any objections to that?
Yeah, this is Diane. I wanted to comment on this one. It seems like this number isn't really accurate in that I think this was a note earlier. It doesn't reflect the reduced scope of this with less overhang at the gym. And I think this is something we should give some attention to, because this wood look soffit really had a lot of attractive qualities on these entrances. And it sounds like we'd be going away from that. And I'd at the very least like to consider it as an alternate. I think it's a design and appearance look that is a bit of a step down.
Agreed. And I would also offer, if we do something alternate, that it's not the EIFS system. It's another product.
Okay.
This is Katie. I feel like I don't fully understand what the EIFS would look like, so I would certainly want to have time to review this more.
So Diane, to answer your question, I think this is definitely an area where it can be an alternate. It's not a difficult alternate to develop in the documents. The EIFS appearance is basically a stucco appearance, like a stippled, smooth. It's not smooth, but it's like a stippled, consistent plane type surface. But we could look at alternatives to address Nick's comment.
Diane, if you want to drive down Camp Avenue and go by the Stanford Twin Rinks, you will see that system on the brick walls there.
What, the EIFS, Rusty?
Yes, exterior interior finishing system that's there.
Okay. BE11, eliminate the extended canopy off the bus drop-off. I think Luke talked about this as not being an issue with regard to how they manage the entry and exit of the students, but I'll let him speak if he wants to on that.
You've said it. We would only use that canopy for the event that we're dismissing students and there's rain. And in that effect, we largely keep students inside the vestibule. So we don't have a procedure where we have kids out in big gatherings for buses in the rain. They largely are in the building and then exited to the buses. And that's really the only implication for that area, aside from, community gathering. So I think it's fine.
Hey, Kip, I'd like to add one other piece, and that's the ombre brick that's behind that canopy. I think we ought to see a rendering without the canopy and without the ombre brick, just to make a good decision on the cosmetic overlook on that.
Agreed. We are in the process of developing something for that.
This is Katie. I have some concerns about how drastically the exterior portion of the assembly wing will be changed by eliminating both the ombre, but most specifically the canopy. We spent a lot of time working on that, talking about how it would break up the mass of this long, big brick wall. I'm just concerned of what we might wind up with.
Again, to Sean's comment, Katie, we are studying this right now, and we're developing additional images that we will bring to the committee to review that in more detail.
Hey, Kemp, one other piece to that, and I honestly, I can't see the images, but there was a discussion earlier in the presentation about the sidewalk elimination coming around from the front to the side. Is that sidewalk the extension of that canopy that goes up from the bus lanes and around to the front that talked about being eliminated?
It would not be eliminated, just reduced in width to match the opposite side of the bus entry.
Oh yeah, okay, good. All right. That's why I just want to make sure, because if it was being eliminated, I'd like to see that too, but if it's still there, that's great. Thanks.
Hey, Kemp, it's Duke. To Katie's point, and I know you guys are working on it, but you wind up with this massive wall, and if we go to a single brick color, and then an option to break it up, maybe plantings, but then you get into size of plantings, and so you're removing one cost but adding another cost. So I'm sure all stuff you guys are thinking about, but that's just where my head goes to in terms of tall, skinny tree plantings that we would have to substitute in to kind of break that up a little bit. So I think we just need to, it's such a big area. We just need to see something sooner than later around your thoughts on that.
Agreed.
Right.
Agreed, Duke.
Yeah, we agree. And it being the north facing wall, we're looking at that, and we also don't want to provide a lot of maintenance for plantings.
Right.
And this is Diane. Also at the entrance itself, I think perhaps we could make it a little bit more significant than what's demonstrated in the sketch there. It's a secondary entrance, but then it's a public entrance to the building for the gymnasium purposes. So it'd be interesting to see a little more design and importance brought to this area.
Okay, thank you.
Will do.
Okay, the BE 16 eliminate fritted glass at entry and courtyard. I gather the idea was to make that an add alternate.
Correct.
Everybody agree? Any disagreements?
Sorry, this is Katie. I just have to say that I would be really, really sad to see this go. I loved this idea, and I thought that it would really bring a lot to the school, not just in the courtyard, but also in the hallways, especially during those winter months when kids aren't getting outside as much. I really liked the idea of the light patterns it would play on the floors. I would be very sad to see this go.
It's my understanding that there was an alternate for this as well in terms of I think Dean, you had spoken that there might be something less permanent that we could consider.
Yeah, that's right, Diane. There's different types of films that can be applied to the glazing interior surface after the fact, but they do have there's a level of permanence there that just doesn't exist with the frit pattern kind of inherent to the glass.
Right, but I agree we should come up with alternatives for this area. So I think we can provide some options for you at our next meeting.
It could also potentially be it could also potentially be a scope change where there's just very select locations to bring that number down to a smaller number as well.
That's absolutely correct. We could break that down rather than the 94,000 taking the entire area. And just look at the certain areas. Mm-hmm. Perhaps the ones where glass faces the Learning Commons corridors, to Katie's point.
Thank you both for those ideas. I would be very interested in seeing some of those options.
Sure.
I think, Amy, the frit pattern was not on the entirety of the glazing. It was on the entirety of the glass box at the entrance. But it was in fact in select locations in the on the curtain wall adjacent to the corridors. So that could just be a percentage reduction, I think.
Okay, good. Yeah, so we'll come back to you with that.
BE 25, that we haven't seen a drawing what that might look like. I guess we should wait to see what that might look like coming back, right?
Yes, based on the comments, we are in the process of developing revised renderings for that facade.
Right.
We should defer that one. Mm-hmm.
Right. Barrier 1, again, explain that one, or just reference bit on that one.
So this is a concrete admixture that
Yes.
it creates a kind of an internal vapor barrier within the concrete slab itself. But because of the high water table on the lower ground level slabs, we are also putting a backside waterproofing membrane on the underside of the slab to waterproof the ground floor. So to me, the barrier one is redundant, and then we don't need it.
Mike, do you agree? Mike Lynch?
Yes, I do agree with him, 100%.
Let's take it off then. It's good.
Great.
Okay, custom wall coverings. We didn't really talk about that. We did talk about the serpentine ceiling at cafeteria. I thought we had, the first part was we knew the cost was too high. That was picked up in a different area.
The estimate adjustment addressed the initial unit cost adjustment.
Okay.
Which is BI 9.
Right.
And that's been accepted.
Right. Okay. I just want to make sure. Yeah. So what we're talking about here is either getting rid of the serpentine ceiling entirely in the cafeteria, and then step two, isn't that the BI? I thought it was the walkway, or not the walkway, the corridor.
Correct. BI 10 was to in the entrance and corridor.
Right there. Yes.
34,000. It's not on this list because it's under the $35,000 threshold.
Oh, okay.
But that was one step, and then the next step was the cafeteria.
Well, I think we've heard reasons why we don't want to take the serpentine out of the cafeteria. I thought that was sort of.
Yeah, this is Diane. I'd recommend it's more significant in the cafeteria than the hallway. I would argue to maybe eliminate it in the hallway, and then we could always put it in as an alternate in the cafeteria, although I'm hearing a lot of favorable support for it. I'd like to see it stay personally.
I'll leave it in for now. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I would leave it in the cafeteria, and I'm okay with taking it out in the hallway.
Okay, we'll start there.
Wait, I'm sorry, just one thing. The custom wall coverings, what's the next step on that? Do we have to refine some scope to make a decision, or where are we going with that one?
In fact, I suggested that we carry that as an alternate.
Can I make a recommendation, though? I think that Amanda was quite confident that taking that reduction and just leaving one custom wall covering in the project was okay. That the ELP wall covering was not custom, so that's not included in that item. So the ELP Commons remains the same design, and that the other custom locations hadn't really been designed, but they were just being held for the Learning Commons, but she thought she could do that with accent color paint instead.
This is Diane. I would support that. I think in all the interiors that we've seen, having something kind of special at the very entry, but otherwise having paint. I think we've spoken a lot about, especially in the classroom areas, that there's a lot going on with color and pattern that the students will bring to it, and that may not be necessary throughout the entire building.
So you want to accept that one?
Look at that. Sorry. While I listen.
There you go. So I just brought it back to the list. So we can, I don't know if there was no objection to that one, or if people want to wait on that decision. BI 6.
This is Diane. I'd support accepting it. I don't know how everybody else feels, but I would support it.
If you support it, I'll support it.
So here's how I.
Katie, I'm okay with it.
Go ahead, Katie. This is Kep. I put a note in the remarks of the value management list that we'll accept it and look for alternative approaches with paint and/or include certain wall coverings as alternates. Is that acceptable?
That sounds great.
Okay.
Sounds good. Okay, so we've decided that we're not going to eliminate the serpentine ceiling in the cafeteria. We might consider eliminating it in the corridor. Might.
Okay. The next one is BI 12B, and I found some old renderings I'm going to put up here for you. This is more of just a view from our Revit model of the classroom, and what we're calling for in that value management item is that these low marker boards that you see where my cursor is, I hope you can see this, below the standard height marker board would either be eliminated or become an alternate.
I defer to the educators.
So
Yeah.
we talked about the marker board.
I probably won't be here when you get back. Oh, I thought you were going walking.
Mike, I think you got the next slide.
Mike's wife's going walking. But Luke, did you want to comment on it?
Yeah, we did talk about this before. I think this is something that if you want to add the FFE budget, or that was something that we could do later, I thought that was the logic here, but to pull it out at this point in time.
This is one that's an easy add alternate.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's fine.
Yeah, I think it's very important to keep it as an add alternate because it is a nice feature. If we can keep it, it would be great.
Okay, I agree.
Done. Next.
BI 13. This one I think is also easy to accept. We will make sure that we maintain the amount of music instrument storage cabinets that you need for the project, but we put it in a different budget. Take it out of this one.
And I think, Amy, you said that there's room in that budget for this, so it's not like we're just taking dollars one place and putting someplace else.
That's right. We would look to absorb this value into the other soft cost.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Next. I'm not sure what BI 20 is, but we've already approved BI 23.
To be honest with you, BI 20 really should be on the design team accepted list because this is kind of in between a estimate adjustment scope clarification kind of thing, because it was estimated as interior storefront aluminum, but it was designed as hollow metal, and it's just a savings that we can accept. Am I stating that correctly, Amy and Dave?
I agree with that, Kemp.
I agree.
All right, that's done. And we've already, it seemed to me, approved BI 23 when we approved the exterior metal fence. Custom, the design by Dean. All right. MEP 6, I don't think there's any discussion on that because we've already heard from, was it Eric Romeo about the fact that the transformers won't be larger and there's no degradation in conductivity or anything else.
Correct.
MEP 19, that's really for Luke to comment on. I think he was comfortable with that, but I don't want to speak for him.
Yes, that's correct. We talked about that earlier. You asked for a comparison to the current lighting structure, and this would still be a significant upgrade for from our current lighting to this package.
Do you want that to be an alternate or not?
I mean, I'll advocate for as nice of a staged lighting system as we can get, but I think at this stage in the game, it's fine.
Look, I probably should have touched base with you about this, but just a wee discussion, a quick discussion. How does that compare to what the lighting structure is over at Tokenique?
I'm not sure what it compares to Tokenique. I know that they do have a switchboard for some basic lighting. This was a more extensive package with stage lighting. I thought this was fairly top of the line from my vantage point, but no, I don't know the comparison to Tokenique.
So just when I look at those performances that are over there in the summer and different things, you know, just want to make sure we don't cut it too short, whatever that means. Is there any chance of getting another look at this, just for our music people just to sign off, theater people to sign off on it a wee bit? Is there any chance of? Are you for? I just don't know the extent of the reduction in it, so it's hard for me to make it a distinction. But if you're comfortable, that's fine. And just.
Well, we don't have to do it right now, Alan. We could just say, just defer that for the moment. It's going to be another week or so. We'll have time to look at it.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that if possible, just to make sure that we got the bases covered that we need to.
Let's do it. We're not trying to decide everything today, please.
Mm-hmm. That's fine.
But I think MEP 21 we have decided on, right, guys?
Yes.
Thank you. The miscellaneous one, I think, is merely a current estimate, hoping to get larger on not doing the enabling phase and instead doing the alternate phasing. So there's nothing really to discuss there except in terms of any more you can find. Now the next three miscellaneous 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 8. Are you all prepared to talk about those right now, or do you feel comfortable about them? I know, Duke, you had a problem about the vestibule, absorbing the area of the vestibule from the lobby to the courtyard.
Yeah, this is Diane. I think Duke stepped away from the phone. I think giving consideration to all these items is really valuable. I think it tightens up the design quite a bit. I have a little bit of a concern with the relocation of the room into the hinge. I'd like to see a little more design on that before and perhaps likewise to Duke's point, I think a simplification in this location that's being shown right now, the entryway to the courtyard, I think it benefits the courtyard appearance, but it would be nice to see how the interior lobby might be designed and impacted by less space. So I think a closer look at those two in particular. In my opinion, the other items I felt very comfortable with the change to the ELP, vestibule, and the other space changes. But these two in particular, this one as well as the move of the room into that knuckle, I'd like to see a little more design on.
Okay, understood. So going back to the list, I can delineate which that is. 1 second.
Right. Well,
so that would be accepting we didn't talk about 4, but I think 4 is sort of an easy one. The price is unfortunately a little lower than the 39,000. 4, 5, and 8, it sounds like are accepted, and 6, which is the redesign at the hinge, and 3, which is the lobby vestibule, will provide additional plan and design slides for you.
Okay. That runs through our list today. Obviously, there's some things on the list which we've deferred or want to hear some more about. The biggest one is the sunshades in terms of dollar value, but I think we're almost into the 2.5-hour mark today. I think that's a lot of work. And are you satisfied, Amy, that we've covered quite a bit of ground here?
Absolutely. I appreciate all of the recommendations and accepted items that you've already decided upon. I think that the MEP one is a big decision that helps us move forward on redesign of that basement that we talked about in last week's meeting.
Right.
So that's a great help to us. And we'll move forward with providing you some more design visual aids to help you make your decisions about the bus entry and these other area changes.
Good.
So that being
Everybody-
said, it sounds like we need to create another meeting. And I don't know if people want to do that. Maybe give us some time and then we'll propose a date for that. That would be okay?
That would be fine. Let's make sure that we propose the date by Monday of next week, and we can see where we go. Well, actually, Monday's a holiday, isn't it? Well,
Oh, that's right.
Not
It is.
that we know the difference, but on Tuesday, let's make sure that you get back to me about what your recommended deadline date for that is, and we'll put together a meeting accordingly.
Great, thank you.
All right. Is there any other matters to discuss about the building project? Hearing none, I'll move on. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Nick Rongo.
Seconded, Katie.
I'm sorry, and Katie seconded. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Thank you all very much for your patience and going through this, and there'll be more to look at in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.